When I was 11, my dad died unexpectedly from a massive heart attack. It happened in the evening in our lounge. We were all there, myself, my mum and my sister Kayla, who was 14. I remember it like it was yesterday. He was talking and about to get up when he stumbled and his face changed. He staggered in his place, then dropped face first to the ground so hard he broke his nose. His body tensed up. My mum screamed as she turned him over. His face was bloodied and frozen with shocked look of agonizing pain. I could see his heart pumping through his clothes as if it was about to burst out of his chest. I just looked. I felt helpless, scared. My mum was shaking him, screaming and crying. Kayla was on the phone trying to get an ambulance. Her face was bright red, sobbing uncontrollably. All I could do was just stand and stare as the life drained from my dad. My face felt hot and damp, my body was numb. That's where the memory ends. Life was difficult after that night. Kayla was never the same again. I don't think I was either, but my mum done everything to keep our spirits up. She always managed to put a smile on our faces when times got hard. She was always there when we got home from school. Her warm smile and a hug was all we needed at the end of the day. It began about 6 months after Dad died. It was just after New Year's and only a few days before Kayla turned 15. I woke up at some point around midnight, maybe 5 to. I could hear a light whimpering, very quiet, but it sounded just like someone crying or someone whimpering in fear. It was difficult to place, but it continued for a good 15 minutes. I lay in bed wondering what it could have been. My hairs stood on end. The noise scared me because it sounded like it was inside my bedroom. I never mentioned it to anyone. 3 days later, Kayla's birthday party was in full swing. Everyone seemed to be in high spirits. I felt like I was just floating around looking miserable while watching everyone else laughing and joking. I could tell Kayla still wasn't right, but she was having a good day. And I knew my mum was missing my dad as she stood with a wine laughing with my aunt and uncle. I just didn't want people to forget so easily, and it seemed like that was the way things were going as I looked around all the happy faces surrounding me. That night, as with every other night since that first time, around about midnight, soft faint crying woke me up again. It felt closer this time, closer or maybe just louder. In the dead silence it really felt like this disembodied crying was in the room with us. It sounded muffled as if it was coming from the cupboard. I slid out of bed and walked over to Kayla's. She lay quiet and still. "Kayla," I whispered. Her head moved around but her eyes did not open. "What is it, Tommy?" She grumbled, her voice cracked and weak. "Someone's in our room, I think. Someone's crying. I think it's coming from the cupboard." Kayla took a long deep breath through her nose and turned back around. "I can't hear anything. Just go back to bed, it's only your imagination." I turned to look at my bed again. The crying had stopped. I looked to the cupboard. The door was open a tiny crack. I got up, put my bravest face on and marched over. I swung the door open to reveal nothing. A huge sigh of relief escaped me as my entire body relaxed and I felt like I could breathe again. I startled myself as I turned around and thought I saw a person crouching at the side of my bed, a black mass heaped on the floor staying absolutely still. Thankfully I was quick to realize it was only my covers that had fell off the bed. Maybe Kayla was right. I did feel like my imagination was running wild. The next morning at breakfast, I finally decided to tell them. I just wanted to be sure nobody else was hearing it. I wanted to confirm to myself that I was imagining this whole thing. I placed my spoon in the cereal and I just blurted it out. "Last night I heard crying in my room. It sounded muffled like it was coming from the cupboard, but when I looked nothing was there. It's been going on for almost a week now. Has anyone else heard it?" My mum and Kayla looked at each other. Kayla smirked and snorted as she stifled a laugh. My mum slapped her arm and chuckled. "Stop it, Kayla. She tried to be sincere, but I could tell she was holding back a smirk too. I was annoyed by their reactions. I'm serious, it's been like 4 nights or something, always around the same time. Listen, Tommy's son, my mom began, we have all suffered a hugely traumatic event and that can affect people in very different ways. Sure, we all put our brave faces on, but deep down we are all hurting. It's just your imagination getting carried away. There's nobody in your room at night, okay? She went on to explain how people's minds have different methods of coping and sometimes your mind can play tricks on you. She kissed me on the head and left me sitting there questioning myself. A few weeks went by, and every single night I heard it. Sometimes it was a little louder, sometimes it lasted ages, but without fail, it came every night. I heard the crying. I had ideas in my head that it was maybe my dad. I couldn't actually tell if it was a man or a woman because it always seemed to be muffled from what I assumed was the cupboard door. I began to think he was visiting our bedsides at night and his spirit couldn't rest because he was so sad that he had left us. I tried speaking to him, I tried telling him it was okay, but nothing ever changed. The crying would still come the next night. The day before my 12th birthday was a Saturday. The whole family went out for a meal because a few couldn't make it on Sunday. I remember that day fondly. Everyone laughed and had an amazing time. We toasted to my dad, and I really felt like I could feel him there with us. I remember feeling like we were all a big happy family again. That night, however, the crying started around 11:55 p.m. It got progressively louder and sounded more intense. It got so loud I wasn't sure if it was coming from my cupboard anymore. I sat up in bed. Was it coming from my cupboard? A bang and a crash startled me and I lay back down cowering beneath my quilt covering my whole face. I expected the cover to be yanked off me at any second, but instead, nothing. Total dead silence. The crying had stopped and when I was brave enough to peek, the cupboard lay undisturbed. Kayla lay there, completely oblivious to the world outside her dreams. A thought crossed my mind. A dark thought. Was the crying really coming from my cupboard, or was it coming from behind my cupboard? Thinking of where the cupboard stood gave me chills, because it stood against the wall my room shared with my mom's room. Could the crying have been my mom? All this time? If so, then I sprang out of my bed and ran out of my room and along to my mom's bedroom. Kayla stirred as I passed her, making confused grunts. I gently knocked the door. Mom. I quietly called out to her. Silence. I turned the handle and slowly opened, just in case I was wrong and she was sleeping. I hoped that was the case, but she wasn't in her bed. I couldn't see her. I pushed the door open all the way. My mom's lifeless body gently swung from the end of a rope tied to a wooden joist that ran along the ceiling. Her face was frozen in anguish, her eyes were still open and glazed, staring off into the distance. There was no sound, just the unforgettable creaking of a taut rope calmly swaying in the breeze. I just stood there. I felt helpless, scared. My mom took her own life on my 12th birthday. The memory of that noise still wakes me to this day. I don't know why she did it. She never left a note. I just felt so bad that all this time it was her crying and I wasn't able to do anything about it. She never ever seemed like she was depressed. She was always happy, always there. But then when she got to bed, maybe that's when she was finally able to take the mask off. I just wish she had told someone, anyone. I wish I, or anyone else had spoken to her about it, asked her about her feelings or how she was getting on. Maybe she never felt comfortable burdening someone else. I don't know. All I can ask of you is to please talk to someone if you ever feel like you have no escape and there's only one way out. Please never feel like you are a burden simply by reaching out to your loved ones for help. And if you know anyone who has gone through a time like that in their life, just make an extra effort now and again to ask them privately how things are going. how they feel. If they need to talk, reassure them that you are always there for them no matter what. Tears are running down my face as I write this in my bed. I feel bad because my son told me at breakfast yesterday he could hear crying coming from somewhere and I lied to him. As much as I want to open up, it really is a struggle. I don't want to go down that same route. I don't want him to find me like that. Maybe tomorrow I'll talk to him about it, or maybe I'll just try and be a little quieter.